Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, August 10th, 2019, and today we're going to be looking at the Democratic Party's best case scenario for the 2020 Senate elections. So, looking at this map, it's pretty much an uphill climb yet again for the Democratic Party. Obviously, there are a number of Republican seats up, but if we're looking at the states that they're up in, they aren't exactly toss-up states. If we're looking at states like South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, obviously those are safe Republican states. But this is the best case scenario for the Democratic Party, so we're giving them every opportunity to do the best. I have made a video in the past about a Republican supermajority. Haven't recently updated the best case scenario for the GOP in the 2020 Senate elections. We have some interesting Senate races up with some new candidates in certain races, so we should see some interesting results. If we're looking at the overall presidential field, there are a number of Democrats that are running in the presidential election that could run for Senate and could win if they did decide to run for Senate, but obviously a lot of them are looking at the White House as their first priority. But once primary season rolls around, I guarantee a number of them will drop out before their own state's primaries just to get in for the Senate election. So we start off the map with 31 Republicans and 35 Democrats. Again, this does seem a little bit better for the Democratic Party than 2018. But if we're looking at the incumbents up, obviously they're in safe seats. Again, states like Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Idaho, those states are probably not going to flip from red to blue. But there are some Democratic seats up that aren't exactly contested. A number of these Democratic seats are safe for the Democratic Party. We have a couple of contested seats for the Democrats, states like Alabama, states like Michigan, the usual toss-up states in the, not Alabama, actually. But the typical toss-up states in the presidential elections, I guess, like Michigan, Iowa, North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, those states are also up, Arizona. And that should be pretty interesting. So 2020 is going to roll around pretty soon in about a year and a half. So obviously that's why I'm making this video. But there are some safe Democratic states that I'm going to characterize as safe Democratic states just straight off the bat. States like New Jersey. Actually, I think Cory Booker is here, who of course is running for president. The state of Nebraska, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and I'm not going to characterize New Hampshire as safe, not just yet, but we'll talk about that one once we get on later on in the video, obviously. If we're looking, we go over to states like Oregon. That one, of course, would be safe in favor of the Democratic Party. That puts them at 40. The Republicans at 31. Toss-up is 29. So if we're looking actually at some of the toss-up states, it's pretty interesting because a number of these toss-up states are generally Republican states. If we're looking at Texas, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, these are Republican states from the 2016 presidential election, and now this time around are somewhat of toss-ups in the Senate elections. Texas, not so much as 2018 with Ted Cruz in. Beto O'Rourke is not running for Senate yet. But if we're looking at the Senate map overall, there are a number of Republican states that are considered toss-ups as of right now. So 31 Republican seats, 40 Democratic seats. Let's go ahead and focus on some of these, I guess, toss-up seats that are going to be in favor of the Democratic Party, obviously in their best case scenario. I don't know why I filled in Illinois. I didn't fill in Illinois yet. But states like Michigan, these are states that are Democratic seats, and they currently have Democratic incumbents. They do have some Republican formidable opponents, but they are probably going to end up in the Democratic Party at the end of the day. I would say Michigan would be in the likely column. Minnesota would actually rate as safe. If we're talking about Tina Smith here, she won back in 2018 in the special election, replacing Senator Al Franken after the whole scandal. This will be her first time winning an election. I would actually consider this one safe, considering Minnesota's history. Going over to Virginia, that one would also be considered safe in favor of the Democratic Party. It's already considered safe with Mark Warner in here. He's a pretty popular Democrat. The PVI actually is Democrat +1, but obviously that's because of a number of other factors. It could be PVI, sorry, it's like Democrat +4 or 5. But it's still a toss-up state. In the presidential election, it's probably going to be contested. Donald Trump's probably going to visit here, but it was a Hillary Clinton state back in 2016. Mark Warner here last won by 1%, is what I meant to say. So that puts the Democrats at 44, Republicans at 31. But the Republicans definitely do have a number of safe seats that we need to consider safe straight off the bat. States that are definitely not going to flip. Even in the Democrats' best case scenario, with the right candidates, it's still going to be extremely hard for these states to flip. So states like South Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, including Montana, even though that one has gotten closer in years past, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and the Republican numbers go up. We have Mississippi, which was close in the special election, I think an 8% margin, but this one's still going to be a safe Republican seat. Actually, I'm going to move over to likely just for right now. Kansas, we do have a race that I want to talk about eventually, but I'm going to keep it safe for right now, and then we'll come back to it. South Carolina, I'm pretty sure this is Lindsey Graham. If we have Tennessee, we have a retiring incumbent, but still going to be considered safe. Kentucky, we have a very interesting Senate race, and West Virginia doesn't actually have any too good Democrats actually running, which is pretty surprising to me. If we're looking at West Virginia, they have a strong Democratic history. Even in years past, we have one Democrat incumbent in the Senate. There was one in the governor's race that flipped to the Republican Party after being elected. But we don't really have any notable, candidates in the West Virginia Senate race that could actually win here. So this one I would consider safe for the Republican Party. So that puts the Republicans tied with the Democratic Party at 44-44. Alaska, I actually have not filled in just yet. That one also has a pretty well-off incumbent. Dan Sullivan is running here. There aren't really any notable Democrats running. I don't think there's any Democrats running, but there are two independents running in Alaska, but Alaska is still considered a safe Republican seat. But if we're looking at the states that are left up, Iowa, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, North Carolina, New Hampshire, and Maine, we have some of these states with Republican incumbents. States like Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, Kentucky, Iowa, and Maine. So the only two states here that actually have Democratic incumbents are New Hampshire and New Mexico. And both of these I'd actually characterize as safe at any given point. Actually, New Hampshire I would characterize as likely just right now. There are some characterizations where this one is considered safe, but almost every single election in New Hampshire definitely comes down to the wire. And even in the Democrats' best case scenario, I would consider that one likely, but New Mexico I'd consider safe in favor of the Democrats. They typically do pretty well here. If we're talking about New Mexico, the last election, it was a Democrat +3 margin, but that was 2014 in a Republican wave year. We have a retiring incumbent, but I would consider this one safe for the Democrats regardless. Colorado would actually consider likely for the Democratic Party. This would be a flip from the GOP. The GOP has had a hold on Colorado since 2014, defeating the Democratic incumbent, but Cory Gardner I definitely think is going to lose this time around in the Colorado Senate race. If we're going over to the states of Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, Maine, which has Suzanne Collins, which we're going to talk about, North Carolina. Yeah, and in the Democrats' best case scenario, I would consider that one lean for the Democratic Party. Same thing with Alabama. We have a not too popular incumbent, but an incumbent who can actually do well against a Republican. Remember, Doug Jones was elected back in 2017 to replace Jeff Sessions. It was a huge upset. First Democrat to win here since the 90s, and the state of Alabama went to the Democratic Party, and it could again in 2020 if the Democrats, again in their best case scenario, which is what this video is about, would win in the state of Alabama. Going over to the state of Arizona, that is another state that has had a Democratic history. I think this one could actually go to the Democrats by a lean margin. Again, if we're talking about the percentages, probably within 1 to 5%, but still going to the Democratic Party in their best case scenario. And that puts the Democrats at 50, meaning if they win the presidential election, they automatically have the Senate majority with a vice presidential tiebreaker. The Republicans are currently at 45 with 5 toss-up seats. We have to go ahead and take a look at Iowa. This one has 3 Democratic incumbents in the House and 1 Republican. We flipped from 3 to 1 back to 1 to 3 in favor of the Democrats. It's considered likely for the Republican Party. So this one I'm actually going to consider a tilt Republican seat. I don't see the Democratic Party recapturing this seat. Even in their best case scenario, they would really need to run an amazing candidate. But right now, I would say Iowa is a likely Republican seat. Going over to the state of Maine, I would characterize this one actually as a lean Democratic seat. If we're talking about Suzanne Collins, her approval rating definitely has dipped than when it was before. This one definitely has narrowed down. If we're talking about her last election, it was in favor of, she got 68.5% of the vote. I think she was actually endorsed by Angus King, the independent who's caucusing with the Democratic Party. Suzanne Collins definitely was extremely popular. Her popularity since has decreased since the whole Kavanaugh hearings and things related to that showing partisan lines. But the state of Maine, I think in the Democrats' best case scenario, they could actually pick up here and put it into the lean column between 1 to 5%. So that puts the Democrats at 51, the Republicans at 46. We're talking about Texas, Georgia, and Kentucky. 3 Republican incumbents. I'd actually say Texas would go to the GOP by a lean margin, even with someone like Beto O'Rourke running. I still think that in a presidential election year, it's going to be even harder for Democrats to overcome from the Republican turnout. But if we're talking about Kentucky and Georgia, these two states, Georgia definitely could get closer. I think this one could be a tilt Democratic seat at the best. Maybe lean, it really just depends. But I would say this one I would consider it as at most a tilt Democratic seat. As of right now, we have David Perdue, and it's actually considered a lean by most pollsters. He won last time with 52.9% of the vote in 2014, which is not too good of a sign considering that was a Republican wave year. But Georgia, I would give to the Democratic Party very narrowly. And the state of Kentucky currently has Amy McGrath. She is a very notable candidate in the state of Kentucky. She's an Air Force veteran. She's a lot like Allison Lundergan Grimes in terms of the, female voter appeal. And she ran in Kentucky's 6th district for the House of Representatives seat. She did lose very narrowly against Andy Barr, who is a longtime incumbent. She got it very, very narrow. But in the Democrats' best case scenario, I could actually see them unseating the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. And I know it seems pretty impossible considering that he is the Senate Majority Leader, but he is the most unpopular senator nationwide. And Amy McGrath is a very strong candidate. Even in a presidential election, Mitch McConnell is not doing too well in terms of his approval rating. Back in 2014, yes, he did defeat Allison Lundergan Grimes by a really large amount, but she also alienated a number of Democratic voters, and he was able to ride the Republican wave. And of course, he's the Senate Majority Leader. So in this scenario, I think that Amy McGrath could actually have a narrow edge over Mitch McConnell, which puts the Democrats at 53 seats and the Republicans at 47, an exact flip of what the numbers are right now. And of course, with pickups in North Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky, Arizona, Colorado, and Maine, and none for the GOP. So that wraps up today's video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.